Welcome to Book Nibbles, big ideas, small bites. Imagine tuning into a podcast where the host doesn't hold back the glossy highlights, but instead takes you deep into the messy middle, the part of life where you stumble, get bruised, feel lost, and wonder if you're doing it all wrong. That's the heartbeat of Kim Perell's story in Mistakes That Made Me a Millionaire. And the beauty is, it's not just her story. It's a mirror held up to anyone who has ever been broke, confused, rejected, or doubted, and who has wondered if maybe, just maybe, the very mistakes they're ashamed of could be the stepping stones towards something extraordinary. She begins at a point that feels familiar to anyone who's ever been at rock bottom. A young woman, freshly out of college, thinking she has a plan, thinking she knows the rules of the game, suddenly laid off from a promising job. That first shock wasn't just a career setback. It was an existential one. She'd built her identity around security, stability, the comfort of someone else's paycheck. And now, overnight, it was gone. This, she tells you in that intimate conversational tone, was the first of many mistakes that would ultimately shape her into a millionaire, trusting that life was safe if she followed the rules. From that moment, Kim made a decision that changed everything. She would bet on herself. But, as she quickly learned, you can't leap without learning to fly. She borrowed $10,000 from her grandmother, who had little understanding of what Kim wanted to do, but believed in her spirit. And from that borrowed seed money, she began what would become a digital marketing agency. Her first mistake after launching, thinking she could do it all alone. She'd sit at her kitchen table, coffee in one hand, a spreadsheet in the other, answering emails at midnight. Every client pitch, every campaign, every late-night troubleshooting session landed squarely on her shoulders. She tells a story of a pitch gone wrong, a client she almost lost because she'd mismanaged her time and underestimated the preparation needed. That night, she cried alone in her kitchen. But that mistake taught her an early lesson. Strength is not measured by how much you carry yourself, but by how wisely you build support around you. She began to hire, to delegate, to trust, and suddenly the business didn't just survive, it grew. The second mistake she highlights is something almost everyone can relate to: waiting until you're 100% ready. In her early days, Kim would hesitate, overthink, delay launching campaigns because she didn't feel prepared. She feared failure, feared judgment, feared that if she misstepped, it would all be over. She recounts a moment when a big brand approached her agency. For days, she debated internally whether she was qualified, whether she could deliver. But she realized the perfect moment never comes. She took the leap, fumbled, learned, and delivered. That client became a reference that launched her credibility in ways she couldn't have imagined. The lesson: readiness is a myth. Momentum is real. Then there's the fear factor, her third major lesson. Kim admits she let fear paralyze her in multiple moments. She feared failing clients, feared losing money, feared being seen as incompetent. She shares a vivid story of pitching a startup for investment where she was so terrified of being rejected, she almost didn't even show up. But she went. She stumbled through her words, over-explained, but she persisted. The founder saw her determination, and that meeting led to her first major investor connection. Fear, she says, is like a bus driver. You're still in the vehicle, but you can decide whether to let it drive you off a cliff or navigate the streets. Mistake 4 is keeping toxic relationships too close. Kim shares a story about a business partner who consistently undermined her ideas. For months, she avoided confrontation, thinking keeping the peace was more important than standing her ground. That decision cost her time, energy, and even client trust. When she finally confronted and parted ways with the partner, her energy shifted. Deals closed faster, creativity flourished, and the team's morale skyrocketed. She realized that pruning the wrong people isn't just good, it's essential. Your circle defines your trajectory. Her fifth mistake, staying too long with failing strategies. Kim recalls pouring months into a digital campaign for a client that simply wasn't working. She invested time, money, and emotional energy into something that, in hindsight, should have been scrapped much earlier. The pivot came reluctantly, but the moment she shifted strategies, the results reversed. That experience taught her that adaptability is a superpower. In her later ventures, she applied this lesson ruthlessly, pivoting companies, strategies, and even personal priorities when the old ways stopped producing results. Kim also talks about hiring mistakes, the sixth category. Early in her career, she hired based on skill alone, not on shared vision or cultural fit. One hire, she remembers, seemed perfect on paper, but created tension with clients and colleagues alike. That misalignment cost her months of lost productivity. The correction was simple in hindsight. Hire for alignment, train for skills. Over time, she built teams where every member shared core values, enhancing efficiency, innovation, and trust. Seventh, she dives into the internal narrative many entrepreneurs face, believing you're underqualified. Kim constantly compared herself to industry veterans with Ivy League degrees or decades of experience. She hesitated, thinking she lacked the credentials to pitch confidently, but she realized that her willingness to learn, adaptability, and resilience were far more valuable than a diploma. She shares an anecdote about landing a client who could have easily dismissed her. Instead, her energy, preparation, and authenticity won them over. The lesson, credentials don't open doors, conviction does. The eighth mistake is quitting too soon. Kim emphasizes that many of her successes came moments after she considered throwing in the towel. One particular instance involved a near-bankrupt client campaign. Exhausted, she almost gave up, but she chose to persist one more week. That week brought a breakthrough strategy that salvaged the account and earned her a glowing referral. It's a pattern she saw repeatedly. Those who succeed often endure just a little longer than those who fail. Resilience isn't glamorous, but it's indispensable. Mistake 9 involves the personalization of business. Kim explains that early in her career, she tried to keep business and personal life strictly separate. She learned the hard way that relationships, trust, and empathy are the currency of entrepreneurship. One story stands out. A potential client initially rejected her pitch, but came back months later, citing how she had remembered small personal details from their first meeting. That attention to human connection turned a no into a multi-year contract. The lesson, business isn't impersonal, it's profoundly relational. Finally, mistake 10 is perhaps the most philosophical, thinking mistakes are failures instead of lessons. Kim's overarching philosophy is that every misstep is raw material for growth. She recounts her first multi-million-dollar sale, reflecting on the years of mismanagement, late nights, wrong hires, and fear-fueled decisions that led there. She also shares how in her angel investing, losses were as instructive as wins. One company failed spectacularly, teaching her invaluable lessons about market timing, leadership, and product validation that she applied to future investments. She reframes loss as tuition, the price you pay to gain wisdom. Of course, one of the most powerful themes she circles back to is resilience, the refusal to quit too soon. She admits there were countless nights when she wanted to give up. Once, when her business was struggling, she considered walking away entirely. She felt exhausted, burned out, and convinced she wasn't cut out for this. But she hung on one more day, then one more week, and eventually a new opportunity emerged that turned everything around. Looking back, she realized she was often closest to breakthrough at the exact moment she wanted to quit. Quitting too soon, she warns, is the most expensive mistake of all. Fast forward to the moment of triumph. At 30 years old, she sold her company for $20 million. She laughs about walking to the ATM, printing a receipt that couldn't even fit the numbers on the paper. She was the same woman who once maxed out credit cards and begged her grandmother for a loan, now holding proof of what persistence through mistakes could create. But here's the twist. Success didn't end the mistakes. When she became an angel investor, pouring money into over 100 startups, she made new ones. She backed companies that looked shiny on the outside but had no real foundation. She partnered with founders who didn't share her values. She misjudged markets, and every time she lost money, she forced herself to dissect what went wrong, so the loss became tuition instead of tragedy. Later, she sold another company for $235 million. The numbers are staggering, but the real story is the journey there. The countless failures she repurposed into stepping stones. She often says, "I normalized failure." That's her superpower. She reframed it from shame to strategy. She even encourages her own kids to celebrate mistakes, telling them, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Her personal life ties into this too. As a mom of 4, she admits she doesn't always get it right. She misses school events, burns dinners, struggles with balance, but she keeps a highlight reel on her phone. Photos, memories, little wins. So that on the days when she feels like she's failing, she can scroll back and remind herself of the truth. That tool isn't just sentimental, it's strategic. It's a way of anchoring herself in gratitude and perspective, instead of letting temporary setbacks define her. By the end, Kim's voice in this Imagine podcast isn't just inspirational, it's invitational. She doesn't present herself as a flawless guru. She presents herself as a flawed human who leaned into those flaws, used them as raw material, and came out stronger. She insists that the very mistakes you're most embarrassed by might be the exact ones that carve your resilience, your creativity, your edge. She closes with something that feels less like advice and more like a challenge. Maybe you're listening to this right now from your own messy kitchen table, wondering if you're cut out for this. Maybe you just got laid off, or your business idea just tanked, or you feel like you're behind. Good. That means you're in the exact right place to begin. Don't wait until you're ready. Don't do it alone. Don't let fear make the decisions. Learn fast, pivot faster, and above all, keep going. Because the next mistake you make could be the one that that makes you. And that's how she leaves you, not with a neat bow, but with an open invitation to embrace your own imperfect, mistake-filled, million-dollar path. And that's it. Mistakes That Made Me a Millionaire by Kim Perell. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.